It is time for the Obama meter, a look at how the president's job speech rated with two people who have, call them, different viewpoints. David Addington was chief of staff under Vice President Dick Cheney. He is now at the Heritage Foundation. Ryan McConaghy used to be a top advisor to Democratic Senator Charles Schumer and Congressman John Hall. He's now at the think tank Third Way. Gentlemen, it is time to check your ideology at the door. We want an objective opinion on the president's speech. David, I'm going to start with you. We're going to begin the Obama meter with your reaction to the president's tone. What kind of tone did he take on the speech? You know the rules. Tell us what you thought.
Well, in all honesty, I thought he made a big mistake there by deciding to take a divisive and partisan tone lecturing the members of Congress, referring to particular party labels for people in the audience, and I think that was probably a mistake for him.
That was a mistake, but Ryan, you have a completely different take, right? You found it inspiring.
That's right. I thought the president was bold last night. He was direct, and he laid forward a very clear path for Congress. And I thought he was aggressive, but he wasn't overly partisan. He made a point time and again to talk about how these are things that both sides have supported in the past and should be able to support now. So I thought it was much more about both sides getting to work and getting something done than sort of being chastising or a political speech. I thought it was a very strong statement.
David, speaking of content and how the president tried to appeal to both sides of the aisle, he did make a point of saying, what I'm putting before you, members of Congress, are things that both parties have supported. So surprise me here. Rate the content of the president's speech.
Well, I didn't think much of it overall, but you'd have to say, honestly, it was incomplete. He basically gave half a speech. He talked about all his spending ideas, but then he just promised that, well, a week from now I'm going to tell you how we're going to pay for it all. And if he's going to pay for it with spending cuts in other areas of the federal government, that's one thing. But if he's simply going to hike taxes or he's going to borrow yet more money, then I think it's going to be a serious problem for him trying to get anything through Congress.
David, just to clarify, you don't actually have a problem with what he said. You just think it was incomplete as it stands now.
It's incomplete on paying for it. I've got lots of problems with many of the things he said, although he had a few ideas that I'm sure the Republicans would be willing to talk with him about.
Now, Ryan, how about you on the content level? Third Way, okay, it's an organization that is affiliated or at least supportive of the Democratic Party, but really tries to draw the line in the middle. Do you share some of David's concerns?
Well, I think that if you look at this package, it's about 60-40 or 55-45 tax cuts to direct spending. So, I mean, there's real tax relief in here. There's a focus on private sector job creation by making it easier for businesses to hire and reducing the cost of labor. So I thought, you know, we're a moderate think tank. I thought this was a very moderate speech. And some people have criticized the president. You know, I think, you know, Bachmann and others have called these old ideas. But the president wasn't trying to break new ground. He was trying to find common ground. And he came back to that again. And I think, you know, look, these things, infrastructure investment, that's something that builds for our future and creates jobs now. Payroll tax relief, that's something that puts money in consumers' pockets and prevents fiscal drag. So I thought it was strong on content as well.
David, do you agree with that characterization that it was moderate?
No, in fact, it had some amazing ideas for expanding the size and cost and scope of the federal government. Last time I checked, the federal government wasn't in charge of maintenance of local schools or hiring of teachers or running summer jobs programs. So the president seems to be taking this opportunity to expand federal government beyond the dreams of Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson into something extremely new that isn't consistent with the limited government our Constitution had in mind.
Well, I would just say one thing to that. You know, what the president proposed didn't necessarily put the government in charge of schools. It's money for schools, and if you look at what that actually does, if you revitalize schools, you lower their energy bills. You know what you do? You relieve property taxes. So there's a bang-on effect there too. But it's not hiring teachers or injecting the federal government into curriculum.
Gentlemen, before we go, I'm beginning to enjoy this debate. Before we go, we have to talk about actionability. Can this stuff get passed? David, you addressed this point indirectly in some remarks you made earlier. Tell me what you really think. Is the Republican Party going to step up and support at least some of what the president put on the table last night?
There were a few pieces the president put on the table, like tax deductions for hiring new workers. like getting the free trade agreements through Congress, that at least are related to the idea of getting out of the way so that the private sector can create jobs. On ideas like that, I think Republicans will work with him. On his ideas of hiking taxes, if that's what he's going to do to pay for this, or borrowing yet more money when we're already more than $14 trillion in debt, I have no doubt that conservatives in Congress will not cooperate with him if he wants to do damage to the American economy that way.
All right, and Ryan, sorry, I have to assume you strongly disagree.
Well, you know, I think that there are definitely some things that both parties can work on, but the actionability is really in Congress's court here. I think the president made an effort. He did the best job he could to find things that, you know, 50 Republicans have supported the payroll tax. You have Republicans and Democrats for an infrastructure bank. So he's come his halfway. If there's some in Congress who decide that because he proposes it, they can't support it, there's nothing he can do about that. So the initial comments from Boehner and Cantor are so far that they're open to working on some things, but they also said they wanted to avoid default, and we went to the brink there. So we'll have to see. But I think it was notable that the president said this is going to be paid for. He's going to put out his recommendations on that next week, and that's a critical element of it that should speak to deficit-sensitive moderates and to conservatives as well.
Well, I think, gentlemen, it is fair to say that on the subject of the president's speech, no matter how you slice it, you disagree. Ryan McConaghy of The Third Way, and also David Addington, former legal counsel for President Dick Cheney and now working at the Heritage Foundation. Very good to have you both, gentlemen. This is an important speech, and your perspectives add valuable insight to the takeaway we want to bring our viewers.